Hello, everybody. Kris Gethin here, and welcome to another episode of the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. I'm actually recording this from my hotel room in San Diego. And on the other end of the line here, I have Dr. Scott. Thank you very much for coming onto the show, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kris.
So Dr. Scott is one of the few HBOT providers in the country that creates personalized treatment plans for patients that includes health optimization medicine as its foundation, cutting edge and dynamic HBOT protocols, as well as adjunctive technologies, practices, and practitioners. So he conducts and consults and educates and advocates for patients locally in the Bay Area where he lives and worldwide. Virtually, his website, which is www.integrativehbot.com. And I will actually put this link in the show notes as well. So HBOT is something, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, is something that I've used several times in the past. I'm sure if you guys have followed me on my socials, you'd see me that I've posted that several times, particularly when I was getting ready for my Ironman triathlon and ultra marathon. That's where I really felt the effects of having this treatment. So, Dr. Scott, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what made you stumble across this treatment in particular, and for you to be the forefront flag bearer of this treatment?
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction, Kris. And it's really awesome to be with you and your audience. It's a fantastic crew that you have following you that is going to be, I think, have a lot of fun with us, because hyperbaric therapy has a fantastic ability to synergize, accelerate, heal, optimize, rejuvenate. And there's lots of reasons for that, and we'll talk about it. But my background starts off, so I grew up the son of a chiropractor, so very outside the medical system, always knowing that the body had this fantastic way of healing itself if given the right tools. And for my father, it was adjustment. It was also taking things out of people's diets and very out of the box types of thinking. I went to medical school, though, thinking, well, maybe there's something to this conventional world, too. Maybe there's something that it can offer. And it absolutely can offer a lot from the acute care side of things. But from the long-term maintenance for even chronic conditions, it's not that great, right? So I knew that when I was going through medical school, my idea was to find a way to bring these sort of alternative and conventional communities together, or at least in my own practice in some way. I found out about hyperbaric oxygen therapy in a trauma center, actually in Baltimore, where I trained. And the trauma center is one of the busiest trauma centers in the world, actually. Chicago as well has a pretty big trauma center because of the unfortunate crime rates and things, but great place to train. And so I was inside that facility for about 3 weeks as a medical student, and every 3 nights I took a 30-hour shift. So 30 hours on and then 4 hours. Well, I guess then the next day you come back and start all over again. So it was pretty intense. I saw some crazy things: flesh-eating bacteria, carbon monoxide poisoning. I mean, tons of stabbings and shot and gunshot wounds and stuff like that too. But they used this hyperbaric chamber in the basement to heal people that had these soft tissue infections and carbon monoxide poisoning. And I saw people that were like on ventilators, on respirators, going in and walk out of the chamber when they were done. And it was pretty amazing to see them do this. I mean, and I had no idea what was going on in these chambers. So I asked the technicians and I asked the physicians that were involved, I'm like, what are you guys doing in there? And they told me it was just super simple. It was just oxygen and pressure combined together to transform physiology and accelerate healing. And I was kind of like, that's my holy shit moment, really, when it came down to what I wanted to do with my life. As far as in the medical world, at least initially, after finishing my training. I was still very much not done with my training yet. So I had a lot of time to explore some other things. But really, in general, I knew after that hyperbaric therapy was likely going to be my anchor as a therapy going forward. So after finishing my residency, I moved to California with my wife and my kids, and I became a medical director of a hyperbaric facility in San Francisco, where I still live now, just south of the city. And I created an integrative practice around hyperbaric medicine being the foundation of my practice, or at least the main therapy that I used. But over time, understanding that it was a therapy that was fantastic for all the ways we'll discuss, but it did require, in my opinion, looking at an integrative approach. So looking at dietary changes, supplements, looking at labs, looking at other technologies, looking at other therapies and practitioners to really create a full spectrum plan and a full spectrum healing modality that it truly could be. If it was used correctly, it could almost be used in any particular capacity, in the acute setting and also in the chronic setting for long-term issues. But it had to be used in the correct way at the correct time. And that's what I began to learn over the many years of practicing.
Right. Okay. So it's not just you're not just providing the HBOT treatment. It's more of a global aspect that you're looking from people's lifestyle, their nutrition, training, sleep. You're quantifying a lot by the sounds of it.
Well, what I started off with was just doing hyperbaric therapy and then referring people to my network of colleagues and practitioners and other therapies around the Bay Area, around the world. I have, if for anything, you can, again, as an example, like for cancer, I have people come to me and ask me for hyperbaric therapy for cancer specifically. Then I refer them to integrative oncologist, refer them to therapies around the world. So my practice sort of began as a conducting like practice. I would conduct people around the world for the therapies and practitioners that I thought would help them. And then I always had hyperbaric therapy as the piece that I was consulting on. Over time, I began transitioning my practice, evolving it to have a foundation even underneath hyperbaric therapy. And that's what health optimization medicine is all about. And that's kind of this more full spectrum analysis of your health, the cellular health, gut health, immune system health, hormonal health. And then that's my own practice. And on top of that is the best biohack, the best optimal performance therapy that I know of. I mean, I'm slightly biased, which is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So,
of course, yeah. Now speaking of cancer, because the reason why I bring this up is that I'm sure you know Sean Wells.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I've spoken to Sean many times. I've had him on the podcast a couple of times, and he said he's helped a couple of people that have had various types of cancer. And one of the suggestions that he makes, obviously, he's a keto advocate, the keto lifestyle, high levels of IV vitamin C, and hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy as well was another one of those critical pieces that he suggests. Why is that when it comes to the treatment of cancer?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. I just met Sean for the first time a couple of days ago at a conference. So
really?
Synchronicity there at a keto conference.
Oh.
Actually.
All right. Okay.
The Metabolic Health Summit. So I was down there for a lot of reasons. In fact, one of the reasons I got involved with that conference and going is because the ketogenic diet and hyperbaric oxygen therapy have some synergistic potential, and that's really what Sean is talking about. And I did a lecture on IV vitamin C and hyperbaric oxygen therapy about a year ago at the Riordan Clinic down in Iowa, Kansas. It was in Kansas. Yes. Forgive me my Midwestern geography and states, but so because there's lots of potential synergistic opportunities when you combine them together. And really what it comes down to, I think might be better to start off with, if you're okay with it, Kris, is just to talk about the physiology of hyperbaric therapy, what's happening in the chamber. And then we can sort of dovetail that into what happens in cancer and some other conditions as well. But as I was kind of alluding to, it was a super simple realization for me that it was just a combination of increased oxygen in the body and increased pressure on the body at the same time. The combination of those two was what's happening in the hyperbaric chamber. And it's the combination of the two together that drives more oxygen in circulation. Typically we carry oxygen on red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen from our lungs where we take a deep breath or a shallow breath, depending on the moment. And that oxygen gets carried on red blood cells and it goes to the rest of our body to perform our physiological functions. We need oxygen to survive more than a couple minutes. Without it, we die. Oxygen is the final electron receptor in the mitochondria, which are they're classically called the powerhouse of our cells. They make energy. Without oxygen, we can't make energy, we die. So typically oxygen is carried on these red blood cells. But what you can actually do is carry oxygen in another location in the system too, which actually is the plasma or the liquid of your blood. The liquid of your blood has very little oxygen in it at sea level. And at sea level, you only have 21% oxygen in the air that you're breathing. So if you're on a mountain, obviously you're going to have less oxygen in the air that you're breathing. And if you're at the Dead Sea, the lowest place that's not underwater, you'd have more oxygen in the air that you're breathing. You may know that the Dead Sea has been known for thousands of years, to be a healing place. Part of it's the mud and maybe the water, but also because there's actually more oxygen in the air that you're breathing. So despite that, you have this 21% oxygen in the air that you're breathing, and you're getting, if you've ever done a pulse oximeter on your finger before, you know that you have 97 to 100% oxygen saturation if you have normal lungs. That means that under normal conditions at 21% oxygen, you're getting almost all of those sites bound on your hemoglobin molecules that carry oxygen bound already. So the question is, how can you increase the amount of oxygen carrying capacity? And this comes over for your athletes as well in endurance, right? So you can increase oxygen carrying capacity by one of two ways, by increasing red blood cell mass or by increasing oxygen diffusion into the plasma. Now, red blood cell mass you can increase by a couple ways. The most common way, as you probably know, Kris, is altitude training. You can go to altitude, you can increase the stimulation of a hormone called epogen, which increases the amount of red blood cells that are produced by your bone marrow and by your kidneys, actually. EPO is actually produced by your kidneys, and red blood cells are produced by your bone marrow and your spleen. But anyway, so sorry about that. So you're increasing the amount of red blood cell mass because of this epogen, this hormone that's being released when you're at altitude. You also can do this illegally, as you likely know, by taking performance-enhancing drugs, which is actually epogen, and that's what Lance Armstrong and other cyclists and other performance athletes tend to do. You also can transfuse yourself blood, so you can get blood transfused into you, red blood cells, right before a race or an event, and as a result of that, you'll have increased oxygen carrying capacity because you have more red blood cells. Now, in a chamber, you're actually increasing the amount of oxygen that's being diffused into the plasma or the liquid of your blood. And the only way you're able to do that is that because we're increasing the pressure of the chamber around you. So the pressure of the chamber around you is simulating the pressure you would feel under a certain amount of seawater. So we all know that water is really heavy. You carry a bucket of water, it's extremely heavy. When you're swimming in the water, you're scuba diving or snorkeling or whatever, you don't feel that because you're weightless in the water, but all that water is extremely heavy and actually changing your physiology. So that pressure combined with the oxygen actually changes your physiology by physics, something called Henry's law, if anybody cares. And Henry's law basically states the more pressure you put on a gas, the more that gas is going to go from a gaseous form to a liquid form. So now you have 1,200% more oxygen in circulation, Kris, or more potentially. And now all that oxygen can have a significant physiologic shift, both acutely and also over the long term with an oxygen infusion protocol. So, and this is kind of where we're going now with the cancer part. So when you have this acute infusion of oxygen, there's a number of things that happen. Now you have 1,200% more oxygen in circulation. So if you have an injury, a mild one or a terrible one like a stroke or a heart attack where you have a blockage of blood flow, you have tissue that's acutely in danger of deteriorating or dying, you can get so much more oxygen in circulation, potentially protecting that tissue because you've diffused out of a blood vessel now. So like if you have, it's like diffusion of water, like osmosis, right? You have oxygen in the blood vessel. Now, the more oxygen in that blood vessel, the more that it's going to diffuse outside of that blood vessel, the further it's going to diffuse outside that blood vessel. So you're protecting tissue, really is what it comes down to. So acute heart attacks, acute strokes, acute traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, acute trauma, concussions, traumatic brain injuries, also known as, you can protect tissue from dying and you can save people's lives, you can save people's limbs, and you can save people's neurologic function and hearts. I mean, it's pretty amazing what we can do. All that oxygen in circulation is also causing a constriction of blood vessels at deeper pressures. And that constriction is really good if you have trauma, because if you have trauma, you're going to have swelling. And swelling is not good, especially if it's in your brain, obviously. So we can decrease the amount of swelling and decrease the amount of inflammation almost immediately because that blood vessel is going to get smaller in diameter. The net, even though you have that small blood vessel or smaller than usual, you've diffused so much oxygen in circulation that it doesn't matter that actually that blood vessel is smaller because you still have so much more oxygen in it than you would have otherwise. Now, all that oxygen also creates what we call, and some people get scared of, but not people that know exercise well, is something called oxidative stress or hormetic stress. You're familiar with the term hormetic stress, Kris?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so oxygen, exercise, cold, hot, they're all hormetic stress. The idea is that your body is subject to a stress and then it reacts with a way to make it more optimized. And in this case, that is creating an antioxidant surge. So we think of oxidative stress as being bad, but as you know from exercise, of course, it can be a good thing because your body, as long as it has the capacity to heal itself or the capacity to have a reactive antioxidant surge, then it has the ability to protect itself from the stress that happens with this oxidative load. Now, cancer cells specifically do not have the ability to produce the protective measures that regular cells do under oxidative stress, especially in the setting of a ketogenic diet when they're already being stressed because they're not getting their primary fuel source, at least for most cancers, which is glucose. So Sean and others think that the ketogenic diet combined with hyperbaric therapy is like a 1-2 punch. You have the ketogenic diet that's starving the cancer cells of the glucose, which they need, and you have hyperbaric oxygen therapy at deeper pressures that put on an oxidative load or a stress load on the cancer itself, which they cannot actually survive. And then the third piece of IV vitamin C, it's another oxidative load. It's another stress on the cancer cells, making something like what's called hydrogen peroxide in the cells, which we all use for like cuts and things. But our body uses hydrogen peroxide and other what we call oxygen radicals to actually kill cancer cells and kill bugs and bacteria, viruses, and fungus as well. So in the short run, you have this acute infusion of hyperbaric therapy that's potentially causing this oxidative stress that normal people have no problem with having this reactive antioxidant surge and doing well, but under various other pathological conditions like cancer, it can be very much a synergistic tool for helping with cancer treatment.
Right. Okay. And I know there's a lot of people right now listening to this and thinking, God, what is hyperbaric oxygen? Like, what does that treatment look like? Now, there seems to be several modalities that there are some confusion about. I'd
Sure.
love to clear it up because a lot of people think, okay, I look at this tank that I have to get in for like 20 minutes, maybe longer. And then other people see that maybe I have to go on a bike with, like you said, a pulsometer and with a mask, and it's like a Live O2 machine. And now I've got to pedal as fast as I can.
Sure.
You know, are both of these hyperbaric oxygen modalities? And if so, is one better than the other?
Sure. So I know the Live O2 technology well, and I know they compare themselves a lot to hyperbaric therapy, but it's a different technology entirely. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is your whole body goes inside of a chamber. That chamber can be a soft, like nylon or polyurethane type of material, or it can be a hard chamber made of steel, acrylic glass. It can be a chamber that's just for one person, or it can be a chamber for 24 people. It depends. And there's various reasons why we have different types of chambers. There's the soft or mild-sided hyperbaric therapy chambers that go to less pressure, less oxygen, used very much so for neurologic injuries or neurologic optimization. Mild injuries also be used for recovery from workouts, for jet lag, for sensory deprivation a little bit, sort of more of the milder things, but they do significantly help people. The hard chambers that are for one person go to about 3 atmospheres of pressure, which is the equivalent of 66 feet of seawater. And those chambers are used for all of our medical indications of hyperbaric therapy, except for diving injuries. So if you have the bends or decompression illness, like so you've been a scuba diver, you come up too fast to the surface and you get neurologic symptoms, that's when the deeper chambers are likely necessary, especially if you've gone down deeper than 33 feet of seawater during that particular dive. That's actually how hyperbaric therapy came to be a treatment, and it evolved as a treatment of the bends or decompression illness. And then over the last 100 years or so has become more of a medical treatment for many different things. But most of those medical indications until the last 20 years or so have been between the 2 atmosphere to 3 atmosphere mark, which is 33 feet of seawater to 66 feet of seawater equivalent in pressure. But over time, over the last 20 years, now we're seeing that there's more indications for less pressure and less oxygen, especially when it relates to neurologic and central nervous system types of things, so brain, spinal cord types of things, along with muscle recovery, injury recovery, and some other neurocognitive optimization. So if you're going to be doing hyperbaric therapy, it's going to be in a chamber. There are different technologies like Live O2 that say or purport that they're kind of similar to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There's never been to like any head-to-head comparisons between these technologies. The idea with Live O2 is it's trying to improve oxygen delivery by using exercise as the stimulus to increase cardiac output or the heart's ability to beat and increase VO2 max that way. But in my practice, the way I use Live O2 typically is a maintenance type of therapy. as some way to improve oxygen delivery over the long term. But it's not directly comparable, if that makes sense. I also sometimes get the question if it's similar to cryotherapy, but I think all your listeners know what cryotherapy is. It's a cold thermogenesis technology, so not really related to hyperbaric therapy at all directly, but I can use it in conjunction with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because what's happening in the cryo chamber, as your listeners likely know, is that you're clamping down really tight. Your body thinks you're going to die. It sends off all these hormones and these neurotransmitters to make you feel good, and then it helps on the other end. When you release off the cold, you get this massive vasodilation, this dilation of your blood vessels. You feel warm and fuzzy. All of your lymphatics you help with the detoxification maneuvers that are happening in your body. Your blood gets delivered to your tissues, and if you have more oxygen in your tissue, you're also going to get all that oxygen delivered. So you can go to the cryotherapy chamber first and then go into the hyperbaric chamber afterwards to help with oxygen delivery, for example. So really what it comes down to is that there's different types of hyperbaric chambers. There's a soft chamber or mild. It's called the monoplace chamber, the single person occupancy chamber. And there's the multiplace chamber, which you can use for diving injury, or you can use also for any of the other indications as well, because they can go the deepest, but they can go to the shallow pressures as well. In my clinics, I use the soft chambers, and I use the monoplace or the single person chambers most often.
Okay, and when you're providing this to your patients, what is the protocol? Does it differ from somebody who wants it for specifically athletic purposes, or somebody who wants it for neuro function purposes?
Yeah.
And what does that protocol look like? Does somebody, because I've heard that people should jump in one of these machines like 20 days in a row. And then other people have different, you could take it once a week. What is your protocol specifically? Let's start off with the athletes first who want to improve performance.
Right. So that's a really good point. The protocols do change depending on what the goals are. Is it an acute need for hyperbaric therapy to help stimulate the healing process? Because one of the things that's going to happen in the chamber immediately is that you're going to have a massive release of stem cells as well. So the stem cell release from the bone marrow in the brain happens exponentially even after one treatment, but that continues to be exponential over several treatments. So the acute exposure of hyperbaric therapy is going to stimulate the healing process. It's going to stimulate the detoxification process. So for athletes, for those that are looking at hyperbaric therapy for like a workout recovery, for an injury recovery, if it's an acute injury or acute workout recovery, meaning like you have your workout, you want to get healed, or you want to detox faster, the protocols are pretty small, like maybe 1 to 2 treatments at a time, maybe up to 5 treatments if it's just trying to help mild injury recovery if you have something small. And if you're looking from like a workout perspective and just healing, even 1 or 2 treatments after your workout is going to help with the lymphatic bump, the detox, and also the oxygen delivery. Now, what's happening in the chamber, we talked about this pressure, right? Pressure is important because it drives more oxygen in circulation, but it also pressurizes your blood vessels, and it pressurizes your detoxification system called your lymphatics. So it's that pressure that's going to help you detox from your workout, to help get rid of the garbage that's getting piled up on cells and all the as a result of that hormetic stress, right? And that inflammation that's happening. Your body needs to detox from that. So hyperbaric therapy is going to help that and help you faster. So in my experience, for athletes that are more in it for like an acute need, 3 to 5 sessions typically is all you need, really. And then it can be just one-offs as well if it's just helping with that oxidative load that you had from exercise and now you want to detox from it, just 1 or 2 treatments at a time. Now, if you're looking for endurance, for example, that's a bit of a different scenario, because endurance, what we're looking there is that you're looking at not only the acute infusion of hyperbaric oxygen therapy or oxygen at this time, but you're actually looking for the long-term oxygen infusion benefits, the long-term HBOT benefits. And what's happening there is that we're actually changing how your DNA are expressing and suppressing various proteins that are responsible for growth and inflammation. And one of the major things happens with the protocol of therapy, and this is when you're talking about 20 sessions or maybe as many as 40 sessions, Kris, is that you're actually seeing blood vessels regrow and increase in density in areas of the body, including the brain, the heart, and even the genital region as well, but also in other areas of the body as well. So we're looking at some VO2 max testing on athletes recently, looking at how after a protocol of hyperbaric therapy, your VO2 max testing is going to improve because you're actually growing more blood vessels around your heart to be able to continue to maintain your blood flow and your oxygenation around your heart while you're doing your workout. So that's basically increasing your oxygen carrying capacity because you have more blood vasculature to be able to do that. So that's increasing endurance. Endurance takes 20 to 40 sessions inside the chamber. These sessions are usually done in succession. So 5 days a week, 2 days off kind of deal, where you get this continuous exposure of oxygen on your DNA that's causing this, what we call an epigenetic shift, a shift on how your environment changes how your DNA is expressing various things to make your body more optimal. That's also decreasing inflammatory factors as well. So your body's ability to deal with inflammation gets better over time in the chamber over these protocols. Your body also has more stem cell release, so you're going to heal better as well. So these are really important, of course, if you've had a concussion, otherwise known as a traumatic brain injury, or even a significant injury like an ACL tear, you've had any surgeries, for example. Hyperbaric therapy is going to stimulate the healing process, and it's going to accelerate and synergize with other modalities, whether it's just plain physical therapy, occupational therapy, or if it's stem cells, or if it's PRP, or if it's other blood products like exosomes or V cells or whatever. I have lots of practitioners around the country that I work with where we combine these things together. So, for example, if you're going to get stem cell treatment, you want to get into the chamber before that, like 2 or 3 treatments before, because you're going to have this massive load or exponential release of stem cells and the ability to actually harvest more when you get the stem cells taken out. If you're going to get PRP, I recommend doing a couple sessions before PRP as well, because now you're mobilizing those stem cells. You inject PRP into your joints, you create an inflammatory response, those stem cells now know where to go, and then you can do a couple sessions of hyperbaric therapy afterwards to help get those stem cells to go where they need to go and then stimulate the healing process within that area that got the PRP.
Right. And how close to, let's say, a competition, or how close before you have stem cells put in you, would you suggest this treatment? Of course, maybe day before, if it's up to you, but at the very least, if somebody has to jump on a plane to Colombia to go get those stem cells, or travels to Hong Kong for that Ironman triathlon, is it going to have a benefit if you have it before and then go on a flight and participate in an event or your surgery?
This is my protocol typically for athletes that are on the elite side or doing lots of Ironmans and doing really, really hard stuff. What I often recommend is potentially a block of treatment that's at least 3 months before their actual race or event. And a block of treatment would be doing the long-term benefits of what hyperbaric therapy can do, increasing endurance, increasing your ability to respond to inflammation, increasing oxygen utilization, and helping with any injuries or any other inflammatory issues you may have. But that's the long protocol initially, several months before your race, before the event, because that way you've increased your endurance. Now you can maintain that endurance, right? For that period of time that's more acute right before your race or right before your event. Right before, or the several months before your event, that's when you use hyperbaric therapy as a recovery tool. If you have mild inflammation, mild stuff after workouts, you can use the hyperbaric chamber as one of your tools to help with recovery, just like cryotherapy and other ways of recovering, lymphatic drainage, etc. Hyperbaric therapy has the ability of being a mild lymphatic detoxification stimulus because it's getting that pressure on the lymphatics and on the blood flow. And it's also delivering more oxygen to tissue. So anything that's sort of inflamed will help the process of getting your body to be ready for the next workout faster. It'll help with lactate recycling as well. So you get lactate out of the system earlier as well. So typically what I recommend for athletes is a block of therapy several months before a race or before the event, and then before the several months before going in and doing your event, you're doing it more from a recovery perspective overall. Now, if you have anything that kind of pops up during that last 2 or 3 months, you can use hyperbaric therapy for 3 to 5 treatments at a time to help with recovery if it's a mild injury, etc. If it's a surgery, what I often recommend here is that you try to do 2 to 3 hyperbaric sessions before you have the surgery, because it's going to increase the amount of stem cells that are released that we talked about. So those stem cells are going to help you heal faster once you get the surgery, and then 3 to 5 sessions afterwards. Depending on the type of surgery, I usually recommend deeper chambers for those, somewhere about 2 atmospheres or a little bit deeper, to really get the most stem cells released. The deeper you go in a chamber, the more stem cells that are released. So that's why I often recommend the hard chambers for that if possible. The soft chambers will help, but the hard chambers typically I recommend if you're going to get a surgery, especially if you want to get that recovery as fast as possible. I mean, we have athletes on the NFL side, on the MLB side, Tommy John surgeries, Achilles tendon rupture repairs. These guys get back on the field 50% faster. I mean, it's pretty remarkable what we can see, but that usually requires the deeper chambers to see those kinds of accelerated recoveries. Now, if you're changing it up in the sense that you're increasing other therapies and other modalities, if you're using, if you're using lights, if you're using cryo, if you're using other types of therapy along with it, I mean, you can definitely see all that synergizes together.
Oh, it's interesting. Now, a lot of my listeners are into muscle building, bodybuilding, strength training. What would the protocol look like for them, and how could they access one of these machines? Is it like, I know, for instance, in Boise, Idaho, where I live, there's a couple of places that have them.
Yep.
Is it easily accessible now for most people in most towns and most cities, or is this something that someone would purchase for their home? And because if a bodybuilder is training like 5 days a week,
sure,
should they be utilizing this on a daily basis and going somewhere, or is it going to be a little bit more convenient if they actually invest in one? And maybe we could talk about the costs.
Sure. So from a muscle building perspective, I think where hyperbaric therapy would shine is on the recovery side. And that's really where I would focus it. It's not necessarily going to increase your muscle building capability directly, but indirectly, your ability to train more often will be able to allow you the process and the potential of increasing your muscle building capabilities.
Sure, your recovery dictates your performance.
Exactly, right. And so from a chamber perspective, most major cities in the United States have hyperbaric oxygen therapy available. And they're in various different forms. There's these academic centers where they're going to have the multi-place chambers, multiple people going in only for the insurance-approved indications for hyperbaric therapy, which there are 14 of. None of them have anything to do with muscle recovery, as you'd imagine, because those are not what insurance will cover. Insurance covers radiation injury from cancer, diabetic foot ulcers, sudden hearing loss, acute trauma, acute infections that are very severe, like necrotizing fasciitis or flesh-eating bacteria. So you'll see academic centers that are doing that. And you'll have wound care centers that are doing a lot of diabetes and foot ulcers and preventing people from getting amputations, which is something that we do all the time. So you also have hard chamber facilities that are doing things that are non-insurance approved. And those treatment facilities are in most cities around the country. I'm affiliated with ones all over the world, actually. And one of my roles, actually, with my clients, those that contact me, is to help understand what their goals are. And I do worldwide consultation, education, and advocacy for my clients and patients to help them find the right facilities for them around the world. Like you said, there's a couple in Boise. There's several here in the Bay Area. There's some in LA. They're all over the country. In Chicago and New York, I'm affiliated with 4 facilities there: Connecticut, Rhode Island, Boston, Florida. I mean, Virginia, all over the country. So there is the opportunity to use that particular therapy in a hard chamber facility. Now, from a soft chamber perspective, mild hyperbaric therapy, those are chambers that are available in your home. So you can get those chambers in your home. And as I was kind of alluding to before, they're more for neurologic reasons, neurologic indications. However, for somebody like an elite athlete or somebody that's using hyperbaric therapy as a recovery tool, I absolutely think it's something that can be used in your home to do that. And because if you're using it regularly and using it at milder pressures, for more mild types of things, absolutely the way to go. Now, for the other things that we were describing, like for endurance, that's more of a pressure protocol that requires a harder chamber. For for recovery from more significant injury, that requires a hard chamber as well. And so it depends a little bit on what your goals are, or where you're kind of at with your training. But in general, like if you're an elite athlete, you're an Ironman, and you're using it, want to use something regularly, you could do a mild chamber for mild muscle recovery and help with get you the next workout and optimize that. In my experience, for the true elite athletes that are really looking to have the most effect, the hard chambers are better, but it's often hard to make that happen because there's so many other things going on in one's life to be able to do it. So sometimes I recommend a little bit of both, depending on what's happening and what kind of exercise they're doing. So you're doing a mild chamber through the week, and then maybe a couple days during the week going to a hard chamber and just getting a little bit deeper treatment to help with the recovery. But you asked about the cost, which is important. The cost for a session in a hard chamber across the United States is anywhere from like about $175 to $425 a session. And that depends on where you are in the country. It depends on if you're getting treatment in a place that's just for you, like a single person chamber or a multi-person chamber. And then the soft chambers, the treatments in clinics, which also have the soft chambers, can anywhere between like $100 and $200 a session. And they as far as how much they cost to buy, typically it's somewhere around $11,000 to about $23,000 to purchase a chamber, depending on the type of chamber you buy. And then one other just kind of piece for all this is that when you're in a chamber, you're breathing oxygen, like we talked about, right? You're increasing the amount of oxygen in circulation by increasing the amount of oxygen that you're breathing. And I may not have mentioned that actually initially. So in the air that you're breathing now, it's 21% oxygen. We increase that oxygen in the chamber up to about 90 to 100%. And you're breathing that either on a face mask, nasal cannula, a hood, or just in the air that you're breathing around you in the chamber. So the oxygen is a very important stimulus. It's given in various different ways, depending on the type of chamber. But to sum it all up, from a muscle building perspective, what you're going to see in a chamber is your ability to recover faster. And recovery in a soft chamber at home is very doable if you're using it often. However, if you have more significant injuries or more significant needs, especially from like an endurance perspective, and you want to optimize your cardiac function and your overall systemic vascular function, the hard chambers may be of benefit, especially as we were describing before, 2 or 3 months before you actually have your race, your competition, to get that foundation there, and then closer to the race or the event, using it more from a muscle recovery perspective.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you. And like I mentioned, I utilized this when I was getting ready for my Ironman triathlon. Not so much for muscle building at that time. It wasn't something that I was savvy to and had considered. And then I used it around the time as well of my stem cells, and I had shoulder surgery. I remember being in this chamber for 1 to 2 hours. How much time is it that you suggest? Is that the sweet spot?
Yeah, somewhere between the two, 60 to 90 minutes typically, so sometimes up to 2 hours. We also use various other maneuvers inside the chamber to help with inflammation and help with stem cell release now. One of them is that if you're at deeper pressures, you breathe oxygen either in a mask or in the air around you in the chamber, and then every 30 minutes or so, you actually breathe sea level air, which is 21% oxygen. And the actual it's called relative hypoxia. Basically, you're breathing 90% oxygen, and you're breathing 21% oxygen, your body sees that as a low oxygen relative speaking. So the idea is that as a result of that change, you get this stimulus to produce hormones in your body that make your body release more stem cells, that decrease inflammation and create new blood vessels. So we're doing that to help as well, as another example.
Interesting. And I'm assuming because, we're talking about the release of stem cells as well, we talk about those hormetic responses. I'm a huge advocate of sauna and ice baths. I do both at my home. And obviously fasting as well is another one of those. Is this something that you include? Of course, we spoke briefly about the ketogenic diet. Do you include the fasting protocol for a lot of your clients as well to help proliferate those stem cells even further?
So fasting is an amazing technology. Let's call it that, because it doesn't cost anything.
Not eating.
Yeah, it's free, which is
Yeah.
always good. It's one of the things I recommend to all of my clients. Intermittent fasting at the very least, and sometimes prolonged fast, depending on the indications. But fasting in general is actually, there's a couple things about it. So when you're ketogenic or when you're fasting, either way, your body's producing something called ketones, right? These are the byproducts of fatty acid oxidation, of burning fat, basically. And those actually are protective. They protect your cells from stress. And so that's why they're actually being used in some capacity with radiation, even for cancer, but also for the ketogenic diet and cancer treatment. If you're getting chemotherapy and you're ketogenic, it protects your normal cells from the stress of the chemotherapy. And so we use the ketones, or whether it be fasting or the ketogenic diet, in the same way in the hyperbaric chamber. It's going to prevent you from oxidative stress. What I've learned over the years, Kris, is that it's really important to understand someone's initial physiology, their foundation of health, prior to doing hyperbaric therapy, if at all possible. If it's an acute indication, you just kind of throw the bus at them, get them better, get them in the chamber, give them supplements, have more technologies for them to use, stem cells, whatever. But if it's a long-term issue, or if it's looking at optimizing physiology over the long term, you really need to look at that foundation, right? You need to look at their cellular health, their gut health, their immune sensitivities, their immune health, et cetera, their food sensitivities. And that's what's called health optimization medicine. My practice, pioneered by a mentor of mine. His name is Dr. Ted Chicoso. And that was what was missing from my practice, Kris, when I first transitioned out of the hospital and out of my training into more of a integrative practice. It was this foundation and making sure people had the ability to produce antioxidants if they needed them, that they had the right vitamins and minerals and cofactors and nutrients so that they could harness the power of being in the chamber as optimally as possible. So over the years, I realized that I was missing this. And then it's sort of, synchronicity happens, and all of a sudden now I have this foundation. So even if somebody wants to be ketogenic, even if somebody wants to fast, or if I feel like that's a good idea, I like to be able to have an understanding of what their baseline cellular health is, what their baseline physiology is, and then optimize that first before going into the chamber and then enhancing energy production, changing your DNA expression of various things to help optimize blood vascular growth and stem cell mobilization and inflammatory cascade downregulation and overall performance optimization, I would say.
Okay, great. Now, it was Thetis who put us in touch, the AKA Primal Hacker,
Yes.
connected us, which was very, very nice of him. And I also noticed that you were at another good friend of mine's Health Optimization Summit in London last year. That was Tim Gray.
Yes, Tim.
Now, I know Tim had a HBOT kind of clinic facility that he had in London previously. Were you working with him on that?
So Tim and I connected initially because he was running a hyperbaric clinic at that time in London. And so one of my roles in the hyperbaric world is to bring the hyperbaric community together and also understand what's happening across the world so that I can refer clients that contact me to the right places to get therapy that will help them. So Tim and I connected on the hyperbaric front when he was running a clinic in London, and then I was speaking at a conference in Denver. This was back in 2018, I believe. And that's when I told him about obviously the hyperbaric work. We had some great discussions about that, integrating it, especially into the biohacking world. I used to consult for Bulletproof many years ago. And when I was consulting for them, I got very much involved in optimal performance and biohacking and the biohacking world itself. And I've become a lot more interested in hyperbaric therapy from a performance perspective and how you can integrate it in a biohacking way, in a biohacking perspective, using other technologies to enhance your biology, using my particular field of hyperbaric medicine as sort of my main expertise, along with the health optimization medicine work that I do as well. So I mentioned to Tim about my work, especially in health optimization medicine, foundational approach, and integrating technologies, but also looking at cellular health. And he loved it. And he stole our name for his summit as the Health Optimization Summit. I give him a lot of shit for it. But but it's all good because the missions were very aligned in the sense of what Tim was looking to do, and he and I became good friends after meeting and discussing back in 2018, was the mission is to integrate technologies, practices, and people in one community and understand how the cross-pollination is so important and so potentially therapeutic that when I went to the conference in London, it was a really nice realization of that from his perspective. And for me, I got to speak about hyperbaric medicine. My colleague, Dr. Ted, got to speak about health optimization medicine in practice. And in my opinion, health optimization medicine in practice is really the framework that biohacking was missing. Because biohacking is fun. Yeah, look at the squirrel, like all these fancy toys and fancy things. Even hyperbaric therapy is a fancy toy that not everybody can access. So it's really the main foundational things that we all really need to think about. How is our cellular health? How is our gut health? Are we drinking the right things? Are we eating the right things, macronutrients wise? And we can test all of this stuff now and see what you actually need. Like from a supplement perspective, the question I always ask is, how many people in the room take supplements? Everybody raises their hands. And I ask the second question is, how many people have measured what they need and what they don't need from a supplement perspective? And very, very few people will say that they've done that. So learning about what Dr. Ted was doing, I became the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of the nonprofit that we have developed to create coursework and educational material for doctors and practitioners to learn how to do this in their own practices, whatever they are, whatever they're doing. And even people that don't have licenses, that are practitioners, that are health coaches, can also learn this too. And so my feeling is that the way to really move the needle on health, as Dr. Ted likes to say, and others, is to create a framework that's outside of the medical mainstream of what disease and conditions really is. The focus is on health. The focus is not on disease. It's not focused on even the root cause of disease, like functional medicine. The focus is on health. And so that's become my foundational practice. And on top of that, I use hyperbaric therapy as my ultimate biohack, really. And then other practitioners, other therapies, other practices, fasting being one of them. I always talk about fasting, connection, and movement being my three things that I tell everybody to do, no matter how much money you have. So fasting is easy, doesn't cost anything. Moving doesn't cost anything. Although blood, sweat, and tears, maybe, depending on how much movement you're doing in your neck of the woods, Kris. And then connecting, of course.
Connection, yeah, and that's one thing that I've noticed, that especially in this day and age, and I'm a victim of it as well, as we speak through podcasts or scroll and contact people via DMs, we become very recluse. And part of that is losing that purpose and that connectivity. And as we know, the blue zones, one of the big fundamental denominators between them all is that sense of connection.
Connection is huge, and it's the thread between all of those places around the world that have longevity. Because the more lonely you feel, the faster you die. That's the way it is. It's interesting. I know a lot of people in the podcast circuit now. I'm sure you do too. And I do feel this sense of loneliness sometimes with people that I speak to. And it's because it's fantastic to connect this way, but it's not the same as connecting in person, feeling each other, whether it's energetically or not. We have these things that are coming off our body, all these electromagnetic things that we don't consciously see or feel, but we actually are observing them. We have this, it's actually super cool how our whole physiology works, but we respond to things faster than we realize. Our body is responding to things 350 milliseconds faster than we're aware of it. And the question is why? And it's because we have this sort of universal consciousness, right? This universal awareness that we're all a part of. And then being closer to people, you can truly feel that more. And so connecting to me is number 1, 2, and 3, probably, in the sense of not only connecting externally, but connecting internally as well to that internal awareness, that internal observatory that you have that's creating the world around you, really, and how you interact with the world. This is not very hyperbaric centered. I apologize, but but the idea really is that for me, connection is super important within yourself and also within the world around you, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I won't get too woo-woo for people.
No, that's okay. They're used to me. I get very woo-woo. You know, it's funny when we were just went for this run now this morning as part of this nutritional summit. One of the people that I was speaking to flew over from the UK, and he said, "God, I just haven't got into the time zone yet." And I'm telling him, "Have you earthed? Have you grounded yourself?" And you know, I
Right
could
on.
tell there was a little bit of apprehension there, but it works for me every time. You know, I get woo woo on a lot of people, but if you feel that it works and you have some way of explaining the fundamentals behind it, then why, you know, you don't have to justify it as being a little bit out there. Just try it and do it. You know, if it works for you, it does. And one of the things that you mentioned, you know, obviously like about gut health and the movement. And one of the things, you know, now we have all these forms of quantification available to us, whether we have, you know, a Viome test or a blood test from Wellness FX, or if we go elsewhere and we have like DNA test appear on or something like that. It's amazing what we can see and quantify and then change and understand. Okay, so it's these supplements I need, not these. I can't photosynthesize vitamin D from the sun, so I need a supplement more, or get myself a Juve panel, or get outside, or you know,
Take some
take maybe
chlorophyll.
10,000 of vitamin D. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, it's amazing that, you know, a lot of we all just look at macros in the performance or body comp sector, where we go,
Right.
okay, I need much protein, this much carbs, and this much fat, and I'm good to go. As
Yeah, how
opposed to
much are you
looking at the,
digesting? Right. Yeah, how
yeah,
much? Yeah,
you know, how much am I absorbing? What
right.
is the information of this food or these supplements that I'm taking here? Are they healing me like they are that person, that person, that person, or are they harming my progress, my performance, and my future? And you know, it's funny when you said at a talk, you ask everybody, you know, you get them to put their hands up. That's something similar that I do. I ask them, have you changed the oil or the tires on your car over the past few years? Yes. How many of you had your blood test? No one puts their hands up.
Right.
What's
It's
more
crazy. Yeah.
important at the end of the day? You know, is it going to be your car or is it going to be your life? And
Right.
unfortunately, people to put themselves last and not utilize all this amazing information and quantification we have available.
Yeah, it's important, and I think you hit a lot of fantastic points there, Kris. The framework is important. The challenge I've seen with all this information out there, like Wellness Effects and Viome and others, is how do you do anything with it, or how do you interpret it? And it's really important to kind of know what you're doing and know. They say like if you're going to test something, know that you're what you're going to do about it, kind of deal, right? And I agree with that, but I don't agree that it has to be just conventional measures or conventional metrics that you look at. So, but what I sense in the wellness community is what you sense as well, is that they're looking at macros but not looking at micros. They're not looking at how well you're digesting your foods, how well you're absorbing nutrients. I find a lot of times in the fitness community, people are over exercising, right? They're over oxidizing themselves, so they're depleting themselves of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and they may feel fine now, but their bodies are going to break down in 4 or 5 years. And I can tell you from experience working with NFL athletes and some NBA guys too. Like these guys look great and they're doing well, but why do they only last a couple years in the NFL or a couple years in pro athlete, you know, in whatever field they may be? It's because their bodies are breaking down. And yes, they're getting injuries, but why aren't they recovering well, right? Why are they not doing? Why they're not recovering as well as they did 10 years before? Because they're older, number one, but also because they've depleted all this stuff that they've overdone over the last 10 years. Like they've depleted all the vitamins and minerals, and maybe they're eating fish every day and they're mercury toxic and or whatever, right? So there's lots of different things that you can see. So building out a framework was what I was really excited about with health optimization medicine as being one of the options for that. The gut testing is a big part of that. And micronutrient testing is a really big part of that as well. So it's really awesome you do the same thing as we do, which is, and we actually use the car analogy a lot too, which is, you know, you get your car checked every 6 months or every certain amount of miles. You should be doing that for your blood, for your urine, for your stool as well, and doing it with your family members at the same time. And then even if you don't have any issues, it's better because you can do things before other things pop up. But even if you do have conditions, problems, things that won't go away, you can still do this kind of work and still see significant benefit. But your conventional doctor is not going to do it. They're just going to check for disease specific markers. Like, do you have this disease? But they're not going to say you're deficient in something that's normal for your age. But do you want to be normal for your age if you're 40? You want to be normal at somebody between 21 and 30 years of age. You want to optimize to the optimal range of where we are at our optimal state of being, which is, when we're able to procreate the best and fight the best and recover the best and don't need as much sleep and, et cetera, et cetera. That's our 21 to 30 years of age for most of us. So that's what, in my opinion, what we should be doing. The normal values that you get when you go to your regular doctor's office are typically normal values of somebody between 3 years of age and 93 years of age. So do you want the thyroid level of somebody that's 93 or the thyroid level of somebody that's 21 years of age, right? Especially if you're an elite athlete. I mean, you don't want a 93-year-old's TSH. That's not going to work well. So it's important, I guess, to kind of take a little bit of a high-level view here is that, measure what you're doing, not only from like a macro side, but from a micro side too. And then optimize your supplements, optimize your diet related to not only the macros, but the micros too.
Yeah, for sure. Can you come back in 5 minutes, please? 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
No worries.
All right, and before we wrap this up, there's one thing that you mentioned as well, is that you can get all this information. You can get your DNA test, your microbiome test, your blood test, but it's what you do with it. And I think that's why it's very important to have someone like yourself that can look at it, translate it, decipher it, and then put out an actionable plan for someone to follow. Because so many times I see people get all this information and go, wow, I didn't know that was going on. That was going on. Wow, I need to fix that. But they don't know how to fix it.
Right.
For instance, if I have my DNA test, I'll go through like Apiron, and I know of this gentleman called Corey Duffy, who's phenomenal, and he's able to translate what looks like to me the matrix into something that is digestible and translatable for this person to understand, and then do something about it after that conversation. And that's a very important part of the piece of the puzzle, to have that call to action after you have it. It's like, I could give you the best training program in the world, but if you don't understand it, you're not going to follow it.
Right. And you have to make sure you watch these metrics over time as well. It's not just a one-time thing. It's like, how do you do certain interventions, take certain supplements that you require, and then over time, look at it again. The DNA is not the best way to look at things over time, of course. That's just, excuse me, it's just a one marker for, what your destiny may be. But your genes are not your destiny, right? In the sense that you can do things to modulate the expression of those genes. And that's what we're looking at with the work that I do, and that others do as well. But there's other testing that's coming out, like there's chronologic age testing versus biologic age testing that's happening on the epigenetic side, which is super cool. There's a company called My DNA Age, which I'm very interested in, because they're actually testing your epigenetics and how old you are because of how well your genes are expressing and suppressing themselves. So there's lots of different things that are coming out you can check out prior to doing the various interventions, and then looking at it later after your interventions and seeing how you do. So in the athletic world, it's how much you can lift. In our world, it's how old you are, or how your gut is transitioned from being a toxic one and a leaky one to a solid one that's digesting your food well. And that's, as a result of that, your micronutrients are doing fantastically well. So in my world, it's having the conversation about the transition from looking at things in sort of more a global way without measuring and without quantification, to one that requires more blood, urine, stool quantification. And then at the same time, looking at other ways of testing, not only those ways, but other ways of testing how people are doing. So in the chamber, for example, in the hyperbaric chamber, we can use neurofeedback, and we can look at various ways of how those change over time. We can look at other types of brain imaging. We can look at heart imaging, or we can look at VO2 max testing. We can look at HRV testing, or heart rate variability testing, as well as another marker. So there's various other ways, but in my world, it's about measuring, quantifying, intervening, and then rechecking over time.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been an absolutely awesome conversation with you, Dr. Scott. So if people were to find you, they want to contact you, they want to reach out for your services, what is the best place for them to do so? And by the way, everything that we spoke about today, I'll put in the show notes here for people to check out as well.
Yeah. So my hyperbaric focused website is integrativehbot.com, HBOT, the letters. I also have a Facebook page of the same name. Those are probably the main places for me on the hyperbaric side. I also have Instagram at Dr. Scott Scher, Sherr. On the health optimization medicine front, I have my own concierge practice where it's based here in the Bay Area, but I see patients throughout California and New York for the most part. And then I have colleagues that can help in other states as well. So it's home-sf.co. So integrativehbot.com, at Dr. Scott Scher, home-sf.co are the three major places. Or you can just Google my name, Dr. Scott Scher, Sherr, and you'll find me. I'm not that difficult to find these days, nor are you. I'm probably a little bit harder to find than you, Kris, but just slightly.
Slightly. We're both unique in our both respective ventures, I guess. But
well, I think we're having fun, right? We're trying to spread the word of the of the work that we do. So
exactly, I love cross-pollinating with things like this because they all benefit each other, and that's why I love having experts on like yourself, because there's a lot of people within my industry are great at increasing their performance, but not their longevity and their health span at the same time. And there's no reason why we can't merge the both.
We absolutely have to do it. I mean, that's the nature of the worlds that we live in, that they're not siloed. And people that think that we have to start just evolving into a way that looks at things in a bigger picture. So thanks for your work, Kris, and thanks for having me on your podcast. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And next time I'm in the Bay Area, I will be giving you a holler. And if I don't see you then, I'll see you at the Health Optimization Summit, I hope.
I hope so. And I don't know the next time I'm in Idaho, but if I am, I'll hit you up.
Yeah, please do. All right.
Okay,
Well,
you will.
thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay, have a great day.
And you.